Hello, my name is Ian Ryan and I'm a Cloud Solutions Architect. Today, I'm going to talk about Amazon Connect data tables. And specifically, I'm going to talk about, are these a viable replacement for any custom configuration UI that you may have already built at your company? I'm also going to talk about how you actually configure data tables and use them in your contact flows. Quite often at companies, they'll build their own bespoke custom configuration portal. The reason why large enterprises do this is that they want to be able to make changes to their Amazon Connect environment without having to redeploy the entire environment. This allows them to make dynamic changes to prompts and behavior, which can be managed by their operations teams. In general, each company will create their own bespoke, unique solution for this. They'll build their own GUI, they'll build all of the custom components within that GUI, and then they'll manage the deployment of that GUI also. This then gets integrated with Amazon Connect flows, so it will pull the data, which is usually backed by a Dynamo table, from this configuration UI, and then allow them to dynamically change behavior within Amazon Connect. When you're creating your own GUI like this, you then have to manage your own deployment of this GUI, you have to manage all your authentication and role-based access control, as this is your own custom front-end application. Amazon Connect have now introduced the idea of data tables. This is a native configuration feature. It is essentially a database that lives within Amazon Connect itself. Using this, you can access values from this configuration or this database within your flows. So similar in a way to when you build a custom GUI to manage your data that can be dynamically changed, you can use these data tables within Amazon Connect to manage that data. Now, this is a native feature, as I said, which means it's protected by all the same security that you get in Amazon Connect, and you can only access it if your security profiles allow it and all the usual role-based access controls and tag-based access controls. But let's have a look how you'd actually use these data tables in your Amazon Connect instance. Data tables are under the Routing tab, and you can go into them and see them here. This is where they would be, but if you've never used these before, you're going to have to enable access through your security profile. To do that, we'll go down to our security profiles, and as I'm an admin user, we're going to change the admin security profile. So under the routing section, we want to enable that we can manage values and edit expression values for data tables. I'll save this change. So going back to our data tables now, let's create a new data table. We'll keep this really simple initially. We'll create a configuration data table. So this will be deliberately very generic, just so we can illustrate how these tables are used. We need to specify the time zone and a lock level. We'll just specify NZ, and we'll do none for the locking at the moment. Now we have our table created. And the next thing we need to do is add some attributes. Let's use this table to store some prompts. We're going to create an initial primary attribute, and we're going to keep it text-based. We're going to call it prompt. There are basic validation options here, but we're not going to really need them for what we're doing at the moment. So let's create this initial primary attribute. And then we're going to add another attribute. We'll call this one value, keeping it very generic at this point. Again, text-based. All that we've done here is we've basically created a key value pair within our table. Now we'll add a prompt. Let's add a welcome prompt. A nice simple message just saying welcome to our company. First time we do this, we need to acknowledge this warning. And we save that. And there we have it. So now in our data table, we have a welcome prompt under the primary values, and we have the value as welcome to our company. Let's go and create a flow now, which will actually use this. We'll create a brand new flow for this. We'll just call it a data table test. I'm just going to drop all the standard blocks on here. just to get us started. We're going to set our logging first. Then we want to use the new data table block, which will allow us to retrieve the values. We're going to play the prompt after that. And immediately after that, we're just going to disconnect. All we want to do here is we want to read a value from that data table and play the prompt. When we configure the data table block, it requires us to specify our data table first of all, which we called configuration. We give it a query name, and we'll call this get prompts because that's what we're doing. And now we specify the primary attribute. In our table, this was almost the key in our key value pair. We want to get the welcome prompt. And the attribute that we want to turn is what we called value. So that's our query to the data table. And now we're going to just play that prompt that we have retrieved from the data table. We select the data table's namespace, and for the key, we specify our query name, which was get prompts, and then the attribute that we wanted, which in our case was value. We can now publish this flow and test it out. Our flow is published. Let's go through to the test chat. We'll pick our data table test. And there's our message. So this was the prompt that was retrieved from our data table. If we go back into the data tables, back into our configuration, that was the welcome prompt that it just played to us. So if we change this now, without changing our flow, we can now go back to our test chat. And we can see our changes immediately being applied. This is the entire idea behind this feature. It means that we are able to make changes without actually changing our flows. We can do a bit more than this though. If we go back to our data tables again, we're just going to rename this one to something a bit more useful. We'll just call it default configuration. And we'll add another record as well over here. So let's just add a thank you for calling prompt. Right, so now we have a couple of prompts defined. One is saying thanks for calling and one is saying welcome. Let's do a bit more now. Let's add another table. We'll call this one business units. Again, time zone New Zealand, block level none. And let's start adding some attributes. This time as a primary attribute, we'll set it as business unit. And now we'll add some attributes for our prompts in this case. It's probably worth noting at this point, as I add these attributes, this is in no way the way that you would actually design these tables. These tables should be considered like a database, and there should be quite a lot of thought put into the structure of them. I'm just doing all this for illustrative purposes. So we're going to add some records now. We'll create a business unit called sales, and we're going to add some values for our two prompts for the sales business unit. We can add another record here, this time for marketing. And again, we'll add some prompts this time for marketing. With the structure, it now means we can look up those prompts by the business unit name. Let's go back to our flow and update our flow to actually use this. We're just going to add a set attribute block at the start. This is just so that we can insert the attribute for the business unit. Again, just for testing to show how to do this. Now we need to update our data table. So let's point it to the business units this time. For the primary attribute this time, we'll read it from the attribute that we just set on the flow. And the attributes that we're going to return this time are going to be the two prompts that we just described. The thank you prompt and the welcome prompt. This time we're going to update our play prompt to actually play that welcome prompt first. Again, this is the query name, which was get prompts, and then the attribute name, which was welcome prompt. And we'll also make it play the second prompt too. Great, so that's all done. So let's publish that, and let's have a look at it again in our test chat. Now this time it is saying, welcome to sales and thank you for calling. I looked up our business unit for sales and found the prompts that it should be playing for that business unit. Going back to our flow, if we now go change that attribute from sales to marketing, and this of course would all be done dynamically usually. But again, as we have changed it now to marketing, and we open up our chat this time, now it is providing the marketing prompts. So that's quite useful, but there is even more we can do with data tables. After we go back to our data tables, we can go back into business units now, and let's do something a bit more interesting. I'm going to modify the default value for the thank you prompt in our business units table. Rather than typing a value at this point here, we're going to use an expression. Now, expressions are going to look very familiar if you've worked with databases before. They have all the common expressions that you can use for doing like mathematical functions and things. It has hours of operation available to you. It has lots of time operations as well. All the usual ones you'd expect. But what it also has, which is quite useful for us, is it allows you to look up data from a different data table. Let's try doing this. What we're going to do is we're going to look up the value from our default configuration for the thanks for calling message. So now this has been set up, so the default one will now be pulling that value from our defaults table. And we can see this by evaluating this values. And once it's evaluated, you can see what it is evaluated to, and that was the attribute coming from our default configuration table. And now we could modify our marketing prompt. Instead of having it saying thanks for calling, we can tell it to use the default. And the default is that lookup. Now in our table, we have marketing using the default prompt, and we have sales using a custom prompt. Jumping back to our test chat, now we have welcome to marketing, and it is now the prompt that was defined in our default configuration table. None of this is particularly novel. This is just in general how relational databases would work, where they're referencing different tables and they're pulling values from them. Some final thoughts. Is this a replacement for your custom GUI that you may have built? And the answer to that, like usual, is it depends. If you have a really simple GUI, which has minimal advanced GUI elements and is essentially just key value pairs or other fairly simple structures, then yes, this could be a replacement for that. However, if you have an advanced GUI which has custom components, it may be doing things like providing prompt playback. It may have custom components that allow you to build up dynamic menus or complex hierarchies or other features like this, which are very much designed with UX in mind, then no, this is probably not going to be a replacement for you. However, saying that, it's worth keeping an eye on this feature, because like every feature they release in Amazon Connect, the very first early release is usually almost like a preview, in my opinion. It's rarely something that you want to use in anger immediately, and probably not something you want to immediately use in a large-scale enterprise. However, it has its use, and it's going to be interesting to see how this develops over time. Thanks for watching. Hope that was somewhat interesting. I'll be doing a few more of these videos on all the latest features in Amazon Connect too. Feel free to like and subscribe and all that stuff. Until next time.